They hunted in packs, these urban predators, who claimed the Wells Fargo ATM as their personal hunting ground. 5 gang members ranging from 17 to 23, armed with switchblades and fueled by the kind of casual cruelty that came from never facing real consequence. They'd been robbing elderly customers for months, targeting anyone who looked vulnerable, weak, or alone. When 81-year-old Marcus Rodriguez approached the machine with careful, measured steps, they saw perfect prey. His movements were slow, deliberate, the way men move when old combat injuries still ache in cold weather. His clothes were simple, worn jeans, a faded navy jacket, scuffed boots that had seen better decades. To them, he was just another helpless retiree with a bank account worth emptying. The attack was swift and brutal. They surrounded him at the ATM, demanding he withdraw the maximum daily limit. When Marcus explained he only needed $40 for groceries, they responded with violence that shocked even hardened street criminals. ATM cards became razor weapons. The metal machine became a battering ram for his skull. Concrete became a bed where they left him broken and bleeding, while they celebrated their latest victory over society's forgotten citizens. But Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez wasn't just any forgotten citizen. It was a decorated Navy SEAL whose emergency beacon connected him to brothers who'd learned to hunt predators in waters far more dangerous than city streets. And when those brothers received his distress signal, they mobilized with the kind of righteous fury that reminded everyone why some prey fight back. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across the concrete plaza outside the Wells Fargo branch on 5th Street. It was 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary weekday when working people were still trapped in offices and the streets belonged to those who operated outside normal schedules: retirees, students, and predators who preferred daylight hunting. Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez sat in his weathered Honda Civic for a moment, studying the ATM through his windshield. At 81, his morning routine had become sacred: coffee at home, newspaper at the kitchen table, then a careful drive to the bank for his weekly grocery money. $40, always the same amount, always on Tuesday. His hands, gnarled by arthritis but still steady, gripped the steering wheel as he watched the area around the machine. 3 decades of military training had taught him to assess threats before exposing himself to danger, and something about today felt wrong. 5 young men loitered near the bank entrance. They weren't customers. Marcus could tell by their positioning, their body language, the way their eyes tracked every person who approached the ATM. They moved with the casual predatory awareness of wolves studying a waterhole, waiting for the right prey to present itself. The leader was Carlos "Razor" Martinez, 19 years old, with teardrop tattoos marking kills he'd probably never made and a switchblade he'd definitely used. His crew consisted of Diego, Tommy, Javier, and the youngest, a 17-year-old called Mouse, who was desperate to prove himself worthy of running with older, more dangerous men. They'd been working this corner for 3 months. Their method was simple and effective: target elderly customers who looked vulnerable, surround them at the ATM, and demand maximum withdrawals. Most victims complied immediately, too frightened to resist, too ashamed to report crimes that made them feel helpless and weak. Marcus knew he should drive away, find another ATM, avoid the confrontation his tactical mind could see developing. But $40 for groceries wasn't negotiable on his fixed pension, and the nearest other bank was 8 miles through traffic that would aggravate his arthritis. He made his choice. Marcus climbed slowly from his Honda, moving with the deliberate care of someone whose body carried the accumulated weight of 3 Purple Hearts and more classified missions than the Navy would ever acknowledge. His silver hair was cut military short beneath a worn baseball cap, his posture straight despite the constant ache in his lower back where shrapnel had lodged 30 years ago. In his left hand, he carried a worn leather wallet containing his debit card, driver's license, and a faded photo of his late wife, Maria. In his right pocket, hidden beneath his navy jacket, was a device that looked like an ordinary medical alert pendant, but was actually military-grade emergency equipment. The predators noticed him immediately. "Check it out," Carlos muttered to his crew, gesturing toward Marcus with the kind of casual confidence that came from never facing real resistance. "Old-timer, moving slow, probably got a pension check burning a hole in his account. Diego grinned, revealing gold teeth that caught the afternoon sunlight. Looks like Christmas came early. Tommy and Javier moved to flank the ATM while Mouse positioned himself near the street, ready to watch for police or security. They'd done this dance dozens of times, and no one had ever fought back effectively. Marcus approached the machine with steady purpose. He'd survived underwater demolitions in Vietnam by staying calm under pressure, by thinking 3 moves ahead, by never showing fear even when death was certain. A gang of street thugs wasn't going to break training that had been forged in combat zones where the enemy was invisible and mercy was a luxury that got good men killed. But he also wasn't looking for a fight. At 81, Marcus understood that discretion was often the better part of valor, that avoiding conflict was usually smarter than engaging it. "Yo, old man," Carlos called out, stepping directly into Marcus's path to the ATM. "You gonna need some help with that machine? Sometimes these old folks get confused by all the buttons." The others laughed, moving closer with the pack mentality that made individual cowards feel invincible when they outnumbered their prey 5 to 1. Marcus looked at each of them in turn, memorizing faces with the same attention to detail he'd once used to identify enemy combatants. "I'll be fine, thank you. Just need to make a quick withdrawal." "Quick?" Diego sneered, stepping closer. "How quick we talking about, Grandpa? 'Cause some of us got places to be." The circle was tightening. Marcus found himself surrounded, his back to the ATM, 5 young predators blocking his escape routes. His tactical mind calculated options: comply, resist, or try to withdraw strategically. None of the choices were good. "Tell you what," Carlos said, his voice taking on the false friendliness that predators use to confuse their prey. "Why don't you just withdraw your daily max? Save yourself some trips back here. We'll even help you carry it to your car." Marcus's steel-gray eyes fixed on Carlos with the kind of stare that had once made hardened Marines reconsider their life choices. "I only need $40 for groceries. That's what I'm withdrawing." The facade of politeness dropped instantly. "Listen, old man," Carlos snarled, his hand moving to the switchblade in his pocket. "I wasn't asking. I was telling. You're gonna max out that account, and you're gonna do it right fucking now." Marcus remained calm, though his combat training was already analyzing threat levels and response options. "Son, you're making a mistake. Walk away now, and we'll forget this conversation happened." Tommy burst into laughter. "Did this fossil just threaten us? Did anyone else hear that?" "I heard it," Javier said, pulling out his own knife. "Old bastard thinks he's tough." Mouse, eager to impress his older colleagues, decided to escalate. "Maybe Grandpa needs some motivation," he said, and shoved Marcus hard against the ATM machine. Marcus's back slammed into the metal housing with enough force to rattle the display screen. His navy cap fell to the concrete as he struggled to maintain his balance, his arthritis stiffened joints protesting the sudden impact. "That's better," Carlos said, stepping closer with his switchblade now visible. "Now you understand the situation. Empty your account, or we empty your skull." Marcus tried one last time to de-escalate. "I'm telling you, you don't want to do this. I'm just an old man trying to buy groceries. There's no need for anyone to get hurt. Only person getting hurt is you if you don't start cooperating," Diego said, grabbing Marcus's wallet from his hands. Marcus watched as Diego opened his wallet, examining his debit card, driver's license, and the photo of Maria. The casual violation of his personal effects triggered something deeper than anger, a cold, professional assessment of threats that needed to be neutralized. But the attack escalated before Marcus could respond. Carlos grabbed Marcus by the front of his navy jacket and slammed him against the ATM again, this time with enough force to crack the machine's plastic casing. "PIN number." "Now," Carlos demanded, holding the switchblade close to Marcus's throat. "I need my card back," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded respect in the world's most dangerous places. "You'll get it back when you do what we tell you," Tommy said, and for emphasis, he punched Marcus in the ribs hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. That's when the real violence began. When Marcus doubled over from the punch, gasping for breath, Carlos saw opportunity. He grabbed Marcus's debit card from Diego and used the plastic edge like a razor, slashing it across the old man's cheek hard enough to draw blood. "That's just a taste," Carlos said as Marcus straightened up, touching the cut on his face. "Next time it goes deeper." Marcus looked at the blood on his fingers, then at the 5 young faces surrounding him. For just a moment, his facade cracked and something far more dangerous flickered behind his eyes. But these weren't enemy combatants in a declared war zone. They were American citizens, however misguided. Marcus had sworn an oath to protect Americans, not to wage war against them. His training demanded he use minimum necessary force, that he attempt to resolve conflicts without violence whenever possible. "All right," Marcus said quietly. "You win. I'll withdraw what I can." The gang members grinned, thinking they'd broken another old man's spirit. They had no idea they'd just triggered the tactical patience that had made Marcus one of the most effective underwater demolition specialists of his generation. Marcus turned to the ATM and inserted his card. His movements were slow, deliberate, not from fear or age but from the kind of methodical precision that had once enabled him to defuse mines while enemy divers searched for him in dark water. He entered his PIN carefully, conscious of the 5 sets of eyes watching his every movement. The machine hummed softly as it accessed his account, displaying his available balance, 847 His pension check had cleared 2 days ago. "See that?" Carlos said, pointing at the screen. "Plenty of money for everyone. Max withdrawal, old man. Don't make us ask again." But instead of entering the maximum amount, Marcus typed in $40, exactly what he'd come for, exactly what he needed for groceries, exactly what his budget allowed. The machine processed the transaction and dispensed 2 $20 bills. "What the fuck is this?" Carlos screamed, seeing the small amount of cash. "I told you maximum withdrawal." "That's all I need," Marcus said calmly, pocketing the bills. "And it's all you're getting." The gang exploded into rage. Mouse grabbed Marcus from behind while Carlos and Diego began systematically beating him. Tommy and Javier joined in, using their fists, feet, and anything else they could find as weapons. Marcus tried to protect himself, but 5 attackers against one 81-year-old man was no contest. His military training helped him absorb some of the damage, but there was only so much punishment an elderly body could take. Carlos grabbed Marcus's head and slammed it against the metal machine's display screen. The impact was so hard that the LCD cracked, spiderwebbing across the surface as Marcus's skull made contact. Blood immediately began flowing from a gash in his scalp, but the attackers weren't finished. Diego had picked up Marcus's debit card from the ground. "You want to play games with us?" he snarled, and used the plastic card's edge to slash across Marcus's face, the rigid plastic cutting flesh like a makeshift blade. Marcus staggered backward, his hand instinctively going to the fresh cut that was already bleeding freely. But there was nowhere to retreat. The gang had him pinned against the machine. The beating became systematic. Tommy kicked Marcus in the ribs hard enough to crack bone. The old man doubled over, gasping for air, only to have Javier grab him by the hair and slam his face into the ATM's metal housing. Mouse, desperate to prove himself to his older colleagues, stomped on Marcus's foot with enough force to break bones. The veteran collapsed to one knee, his hands reaching out instinctively for support that wasn't there. That's when they took it too far. Carlos raised his foot and brought it down on Marcus's chest with all his weight, driving the elderly man flat against the concrete. The impact was so violent that passing pedestrians could hear ribs breaking from across the street. Marcus lay motionless on the sidewalk, blood pooling beneath his silver hair and mixing with the grime of urban concrete. His breathing was shallow, his face pale from blood loss and shock. The gang members stood over him, celebrating their victory. "That's what happens when you disrespect us," Carlos said, spitting on Marcus's motionless form. "Stupid old bastard thought he could tell us what to do," Diego added, kicking Marcus one more time for good measure. They grabbed the $40 from Marcus's pocket, then searched his wallet for credit cards and anything else of value. To them, he was just another victim in a city that had forgotten how to protect its elderly. But they'd made a critical mistake. Hidden beneath Marcus's navy jacket was a device that looked like an ordinary medical alert pendant, but was actually military-grade emergency equipment. When it detected severe trauma, sudden impact, loss of consciousness, dramatic changes in vital signs, it automatically activated and began transmitting a distress signal to a network most civilians didn't know existed. The signal went out immediately, reaching a secure facility at Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek, where operators monitored emergency beacons carried by retired Special Operations personnel. Within 30 seconds, Marcus's military record, current location, and medical status appeared on screens watched by men who'd served with him decades ago. Chief Petty Officer David Hammer Thompson was reviewing training schedules when the alert flashed. Thompson recognized Marcus's call sign immediately. Tank had been his dive partner during Hell Week at Coronado in 1969. The man who'd shared his air supply when Thompson's rebreather failed during a night dive in hostile waters. Marcus had also saved Thompson's life during an underwater demolition mission in Vietnam, carrying him 3 miles through enemy territory after shrapnel from their own explosive had punctured Thompson's lung. Some debts could never be repaid, only honored. Thompson was on the secure phone within seconds. Operations Center, this is Hammer. I need immediate deployment authorization for Code Red rescue operation. Nature of threat: assault on decorated SEAL veteran. Multiple hostiles, civilian location, critical trauma reported. Authorization granted. Deploy with full tactical response. Thompson was already moving toward the ready room where his 6-man team maintained constant preparation for emergency deployment. These weren't ordinary sailors. They were current active-duty SEALs who specialized in operations that required absolute discretion and zero tolerance for failure. Gear up, Thompson called to his team. Tank is down. Wells Fargo, 5th Street, immediate deployment. The Brotherhood was mobilizing. Meanwhile, at the ATM, Marcus lay unconscious on concrete that had absorbed the blood of countless other victims. The gang members had disappeared into the urban maze, confident they'd eliminated another weak target who'd never cause them trouble. Passing pedestrians stepped around Marcus's body, most assuming he was just another homeless veteran who'd collapsed from drugs or alcohol. A few pulled out phones to record video for social media, but none called for help. Bank employees watched through bulletproof glass but didn't intervene. The Wells Fargo staff had been trained to avoid involvement in street crimes, to protect themselves and the institution rather than risk liability for Good Samaritan actions. But help was already inbound. From Naval Amphibious Base, Little Creek, Thompson's team had loaded into 2 unmarked SUVs that pulled away from the base within 8 minutes of Marcus's beacon activation. Their route took them directly toward downtown, ETA 18 minutes. 18 minutes after Marcus's beacon activated, the gang members were celebrating at Mickey's Liquor. They were spending their victims' money on cheap beer and laughing about the stupid old fool they'd just destroyed. "Did you see his face when I cut him?" Carlos bragged to his crew. Probably never been in a real fight in his life. "Old bastard learned some respect today," Diego added, taking a long drink from his bottle. They had no idea that 2 unmarked SUVs were already turning onto 5th Street, carrying men who'd learned to hunt predators in waters far more dangerous than city streets. Thompson's team reached the Wells Fargo branch in perfect coordination. 6 figures in civilian clothes emerged from the vehicles, moving with the kind of fluid precision that suggested extensive training and serious intent. They weren't police officers or EMTs, they were warriors, armed and ready for whatever resistance they might encounter. Thompson led his team directly to Marcus's position, where the veteran was still unconscious on the concrete. His medic immediately began trauma assessment while the rest of the team secured the area. "Status?" Thompson asked his corpsman. "Severe head trauma, multiple facial lacerations, possible skull fracture, at least 3 broken ribs, significant blood loss. He's alive but needs immediate evacuation." Thompson nodded grimly, then turned his attention to the crime scene around them. His experienced eyes took in the blood spatter patterns, the cracked ATM screen, the clear evidence of systematic violence. Who did this? The question was directed at the Wells Fargo security guard, who had finally emerged from the bank once he saw official-looking personnel taking control of the situation. "I saw some young guys hanging around earlier," the guard stammered. "5 of them, maybe 6. They took off when the old man went down." Thompson's smile was colder than Arctic water. Description: Hispanic, mostly. Leader had teardrop tattoos, switchblade. They've been working this corner for months, robbing old folks. Thompson's team spread out to examine evidence. They found Marcus's wallet, emptied of cash but containing his military ID. They found blood spatter patterns that told the story of systematic violence. They found witnesses who'd recorded video on their phones but hadn't called for help. Most importantly, they found the liquor store where 5 gang members were still celebrating their latest victory over a helpless victim. "Tracker, what do you have?" Thompson asked his intelligence specialist. 5 suspects, local gang affiliation, currently celebrating at Mickey's Liquor, 2 blocks east. Security cameras confirmed their involvement. Social media posts show them bragging about teaching some old fool respect. Thompson's expression was carved from granite. "How long ago did this happen?" "Estimated 20 minutes. Trail is fresh. Suspects are stationary and intoxicated." "Then it's time for some education." While Marcus was being prepared for medical evacuation, Thompson's team began tracking the 5 gang members. They had faces from security cameras, voices from witness statements, and a paper trail of social media posts that made the gang members easier to track than enemy operatives. The hunt was methodical and professional. Thompson split his team into 2 units, each tasked with locating and apprehending specific targets. They moved through the urban environment like shadows of justice, their tactical training allowing them to navigate civilian spaces with deadly efficiency. The first to be found was Mouse, whose real name was Luis Martinez. He was in the liquor store bathroom, still high on adrenaline and alcohol, when 2 SEALs appeared at the door. "Luis Martinez," the lead operator said quietly, "you're under arrest for assault on a federal asset." Mouse tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt, a 17-year-old gang member trying to outrun warriors who'd completed training programs that broke 80% of candidates. He made it perhaps 10 yards before being tackled and restrained. Carlos was harder to find. The gang leader had shown more cunning than his followers, leaving the liquor store and heading for a safe house in a neighborhood where police rarely ventured. But he hadn't considered that Navy SEALs operated by different rules than civilian law enforcement. Thompson's team located Carlos using thermal imaging equipment, coordinated with street cameras, and apprehended him at a crack house where he thought he was untouchable. The confrontation was brief. "Carlos Martinez," Thompson said as tactical operators surrounded the building. "You're under arrest for aggravated assault on a decorated veteran." Carlos tried to fight. It was an even more pathetic attempt than Mouse's flight, a 19-year-old street thug trying to battle warriors who'd survived training designed to forge the most elite fighters on Earth. The zip ties that secured his wrists were applied with professional efficiency that brooked no resistance. Diego, Tommy, and Javier were captured within the hour. Each arrest was swift, professional, and overwhelming. No violence was necessary. The mere presence of Thompson's team was enough to convince even hardened gang members that resistance was futile. As they were loaded into unmarked vehicles, Carlos made one last attempt at defiance. "This is bullshit. You can't just arrest us." That old man was fair game. Thompson looked at him with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a slow child. "That old man is Marcus Rodriguez, Navy SEAL Team 5, recipient of the Silver Star and 2 Bronze Stars with V device. He's killed more enemy combatants than you've had hot meals, and he's trained warriors who've gone on to protect America in ways you'll never understand." The blood drained from Carlos's face. "You just assaulted one of the most dangerous men who ever lived," Thompson continued. "A man who chose not to fight back because he left that life behind when he retired. But he called us instead." Within 2 hours of the attack, All 5 gang members were in federal custody. They would face charges under laws most civilians had never heard of, statutes designed to protect veterans and military personnel from exactly this kind of violence. Marcus Rodriguez woke up in the trauma center ICU. The first thing he saw was Thompson sitting beside his bed, still in civilian clothes but with the bearing that marked him unmistakably as military. "Easy there, Tank," Thompson said gently. "You took a hell of a beating. Skull fracture, broken ribs, concussion, multiple lacerations. But you're going to be fine." Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Thompson held a cup of water while Marcus took small sips. "Did you get them?" Marcus finally managed to whisper. "All 5, Thompson confirmed. Federal custody, facing charges that'll put them away for most of their adult lives. They picked the wrong veteran to assault." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with concern. "My groceries?" Thompson smiled. The first genuine expression Marcus had seen from him. "Taken care of. Your refrigerator's fully stocked. Compliments of the team. You just focus on healing." A tear rolled down Marcus's cheek. Not from pain, though his head throbbed with every heartbeat. Not from relief, though knowing his attackers had been captured lifted a weight from his chest. The tear came from gratitude, for brothers who'd denned his call, for a system that had protected him when he couldn't protect himself. "You pulled me out of that minefield in '71, Thompson said quietly. "Carried me 2 miles with a punctured lung. You think I'd forget something like that? That was different. That was war." "This was war, too," Thompson replied. "Just a different kind. And we don't leave our own behind. Ever." 2 weeks later, Marcus returned to the Wells Fargo ATM. The machine had been repaired, the bloodstains power washed from the concrete, and additional security cameras installed. But the most important change was invisible. 2 members of Thompson's team maintained discreet surveillance, ensuring that no predator would ever again mistake this location for easy hunting grounds. Marcus approached the machine with the same careful deliberation he'd always used, but this time he wasn't alone. A young sailor in civilian clothes nodded respectfully as Marcus passed, and the bank security guard actually held the door open for him. He inserted his card, entered his PIN, and withdrew $40 for groceries, the same routine that had nearly cost him his life 2 weeks earlier. But everything was different now. The gang members were serving federal sentences that would keep them off the streets for decades. More importantly, word had spread through the criminal community that elderly veterans were no longer unprotected prey. 6 months later, Marcus received an unexpected letter. It was handwritten, the penmanship careful, postmarked from the Federal Correctional Institution where Mouse Luis Martinez was serving his sentence. "Mr. Rodriguez," it read, "I know words can't fix what I did, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Really sorry. Prison has given me time to think about the man I was becoming, and I'm trying to be better. I've started tutoring other inmates for their GED tests, and I'm learning about the military history I never respected before. I hope someday I can earn forgiveness, even though I don't deserve it." Marcus read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in his wallet next to the photo of Maria. The Brotherhood had decided that some hunting grounds were off-limits. And if any predator was foolish enough to test that boundary, they would discover that some prey had protectors who'd learned to hunt in waters far more dangerous than city streets. Marcus walked to his Honda with steady purpose, his grocery money safely in his pocket, his dignity restored, and his faith in brotherhood confirmed. At 81, he'd learned that retirement didn't mean abandonment, that service created bonds stronger than blood, and that some debts of honor could never be fully repaid, only honored through eternal vigilance. Because in the end, the brotherhood never dies. Stories like Marcus's remind us that honor doesn't end with retirement, brotherhood doesn't fade with time, and some ATM withdrawals are protected by forces that urban predators never imagined. They never forget, they never abandon their own, and they never let the hunt go unanswered. Never. The events depicted in this story are fictional and created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. This content is produced using AI assistance and is not intended to represent factual military operations or real individuals.